she reveals that after about an hour of talking, which really isn't that long, like an hour goes by like that if you're having a really good time. After an hour, she says, okay, sorry, I gotta go, I got plans. And it's clear in the way she tells it that that was a line that she gave him because she wanted to leave him wanting more. And so she says, yeah, I told him I had plans, so I left after an hour. She didn't have plans. And I think that it's super hypocritical that she would resent what she thought was him possibly playing games at the beginning when he was late and had her sitting there for 30 minutes. She really was super angry about that. But she can cut the conversation off after an hour because she quote unquote has plans. It's just a game. It's just mind games. So it's wrong if he does it, but it's okay if she does it. The reason she was angry is that she thought somebody else might have the power in this dynamic. But as soon as she knew that he was like putty in her hands, then she's not upset or annoyed anymore. Then she doesn't see the problem with telling people one thing when actually something else is happening. Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to do a thing that I had tried to put off for these many years. At least a year and a half I put this off. But today I'm going to cover the first episode of Harry and Meghan. That's the docuseries that they put out with Netflix. I think it came out in either 2022 or 2023. And I think it was 2022. And I had some requests to cover that documentary back when I was doing Spare and Revenge. I could not manage it. It's like, no, I don't have the time, nor do I have the inclination. But since I've started to review different shows on the channel as just another offering of content for you guys, it didn't really make sense for me not to cover this. So I'm going to do it my best. Now, I have to say that the first thing that stood out to me as I was watching this was that Harry is supposed to be the dumb one. And I do think that there's like a lot of things he said and a lot of lies he swallowed just in the first episode, where I thought to myself, really? What? You believe that? You really are going with that narrative? Are you for real? But with that being said, I was also not prepared for how much more articulate he is than she is. When they do that really corny little filming with their phone, these little like candid video diaries where you're like really getting the real them. He is able to articulate his feelings about the situation that they have found themselves in. They're so put upon in this documentary, but he is able to articulate his feelings about it, why he feels like they need to leave, the pressures that he's felt his whole life. He is able to give voice to his feelings. The yawning silences when it's Meghan's turn, as she sits there with her head wrapped in a towel, looking off into the distance, being like, I don't know. It's just, I don't have words. It's just, what do you even say? I need it to be over. And so instead of actually saying something meaningful, she substitutes thoughts with silence, hoping that your creativity will fill in her lack of storytelling ability. But okay, we're going to go through this from the beginning of the episode to the end of the episode, so stick with me here. Before we do that, if you will hit the subscribe button or check your subscription status, for whatever reason, I continue to get people telling me that every time they come to watch one of my videos, they have to resubscribe. Something funky's going on with my channel. I'm like, I don't even know what's going on. Ever since the Lady C thing happened, I have been losing subscribers by the day, and yet I have all these people telling me that they love the channel and that they that they came to my channel because of the drama and all this. So it's like, I'm verbally getting confirmation that people are not unhappy with the content, and yet the numbers are not reflecting that. And then simultaneously, I'm getting people saying, I have to resubscribe every time I'm at your channel watching a video. So if you just do me a favor, check your subscription and see what's going on with that. I would super appreciate it. Okay, enough of that. Let's talk about this documentary. As one more little note before we start, I had to try to get through this episode 3 separate times. I kept falling asleep, and I had been warned that this was like super boring. I will not make it boring for you, but I'm just letting you know I suffered tremendously at the hands of the documentary makers because this was boring. All right, it starts out with the most poignant piano music. We're at an airport. We've got like We've got film of like airports, planes going off. We've got Harry coming on with his little video footage on his phone, fumbling around for the date because, you're supposed to get this feeling that he's just been in such a panic trying to like make it happen to escape with him and his wife while the hounds of hell ride their backs. And, he's coming on being like, we're just looking for a change. We can't keep going on like this. We cut to Meghan's video footage of herself with her head wrapped in a towel, staring off into the distance. I just needed to be over. I just needed to be over, and the whole time you're supposed to like be getting this feeling of like, the music would be perfect for a Holocaust documentary in which people are escaping from concentration camps or running from the Nazis or hiding Jews. I mean, the music is so dramatic. And that's the sense you're supposed to feel, that they have been hounded and that this is them finally having the freedom to voice their opinions. You're just supposed to feel so heavy for them already. I don't, but, and it's important to note that one of the first slides you see is that, this information is as up to date as 2022, but then unfortunately the royal family was not willing to comment on this, but they did ask, and the royal family just, the message you're supposed to get is they want to keep lying to you, so they're not going to participate in a documentary of truth. We cut to Harry and Meghan being interviewed together. Throughout this first episode, we keep cutting to them being interviewed together where they're sort of telling their love story, because this is supposed to be the greatest love story never told. Jennifer Lopez thinks she's the one telling the greatest love story never told. Harry and Meghan did that before her, okay? And it's interesting, Harry's sitting there going, I'm so nervous. Why do I feel so nervous? I'm so nervous. So you feel nervous because you're betraying your family, you doofus. The interview starts out with this interviewer showing them together a clip, which she says, I don't think you've ever seen this clip. And I'm like, Meghan hasn't seen a clip of herself talking. I'm sure she's seen every clip there is and watched it 1,000 times. But she plays like, this is brand new footage. Oh my gosh, is this, like, what is this? And it's an interview of her from October 2015, where she's still like actress Meghan Markle. It's one of those like ETV entertainment news type of interviews where they just ask her a bunch of random questions. What's your favorite song? Who's your favorite female actress? And then one of the questions they ask is, okay, Prince Harry or Prince William? And she's like, I don't know. Like her whole vibe is, what a stupid question. How irrelevant. Like that's so dumb. Like she liked the question about the strong female role. Like she already had her answer poised on her tongue. In fact, as she's rewatching it, she's like, I know who I'm going to say here. I think I'm going to say, and I can't remember who it was. And she's like really proud that she like pointing out other great female roles. But when she's asked which prince she would want, she's like demeaned by that question. Like, oh, you think I need like a Prince Charming or something? Stupid question. And the person interviewing her in the clip is like, well, Harry, obviously. And she's like, okay, Harry, whatever. And we cut to them watching this clip. Harry kind of laughs a little bit. Meghan turns to him and is like, babe, I'm sorry. I would have chosen you. Don't take it personally. And he doesn't take it personally. He looks at it as yet one more sign that she just was so unfamiliar with who Prince Harry, did you say his name was? Like, he thinks this is such a sign that she didn't know anything about him or his family, that what he witnessed wasn't her disgust at a question about which prince she as a strong female would want to marry, but as her confusion as to who these people were. And he says as much in the interview. It just goes to show you how little she knew who I was, and basically warming his heart over the fact that she chose me because she loves me. It's me she chose. It had nothing to do with my family or status. Keep living in that delusion. And that's what I'm saying. Like, we continually see throughout this, his acceptance of the narrative she has fed him. He has no original thoughts here. And even the fact that he can't articulate his position, it's because they've had so many conversations. He knows the script now. And so he is willing to go out and say all these things. But every line she has fed him, Okay, so we go on to, this kind of opens up the story of their love and the arc of how they met. And so this, much of this documentary is all about how did they get to know each other? How did they learn who each other were? And he begins this part by saying, and I was like, you must have failed logic class. He begins this part by saying, now Meghan, she sacrificed everything for me. She gave up everything, every comfort, everything she knew so she could be part of my life. And then I sacrificed everything for her, left the life I knew so I could join her life. And basically, we're supposed to be like awed by the sacrifice the two of these people have for each other. Like, look at their love story. She gave it all up for him, and then he gave it all up for her. And I'm thinking, how the heck does she give up everything, and yet somehow then you guys are returning to what she had? I thought you just said she gave everything up. She gave up her home, her country, her citizenship. She gave up her job. She sacrificed all her hopes and dreams. She laid it on the altar of a love story between the two of you. If that's really what happened, then how then can you turn around, abandon and sacrifice everything from your life, reject your life so you can go back to her life? You can join her in her world. Her world no longer exists according to the first statement you just made. She gave it all up. So what exactly are you returning to if she gave it all up? How can you return to her career? How can you return to Hollywood? How can you return to life in the public American eye? I thought she gave that up. Didn't you just say that? Did I misunderstand? So what I'm saying is he loves the idea of their love so much that he doesn't even care if the statements that are coming out of his mouth make any sense. And the reality is, no, she didn't give up anything that she used to have. That was all a show, a play act. I mean, I don't understand how there can be such a cognitive dissonance. You know she didn't give it all up. Because as was very clearly categorized for us and explained to us in the book Revenge, she never cut ties with what was going on in Hollywood. She always had her agents. She always had like 1,000 business plans going on the side. She was always planning on returning and dragging him with her. The plan was always to snag herself a prince and then return to Hollywood with this new claim of legitimacy. He can tell himself this little story as he puts himself to bed, rocking back and forth, and my wife left everything for me, and then I had the opportunity to leave everything for her. Aren't we just so lovely? We love each other so much. But it's like, whatever, if that's what you want to tell yourself, but you actively saw your wife planning for her return since like day one of your relationship. So whatever you want to tell yourself. We have lots of shots of them in Montecito, Meg and him with the kids. They've got the baby carriage. They've got little Archie running ahead of them. They've got a baby strapped to them. We've got her out in the chicken coop feeding the chickens with a baby strapped to her. Like, we're supposed to get the idea that these people are super normal, just like you. And so since, your parents, their parents, like, we're all just the same, you guys. And don't you, like, you want to protect your family. We want to protect our family. Like, come on, don't you get it? Like, look at this, like, lovely little rural life we've built. Meanwhile, the shots of the inside of their house, it's like palatial. There's this shot of her sitting when she's being interviewed by herself. There are these windows, these huge arched windows, gorgeous. And I'm not saying they can't have a nice house. If they have the money for a nice house, more power to them. Congratulations on, congratulations on all of your monetary gain. That's fantastic. Live you. But they're so clearly trying to manipulate you by showing you scenes of her with the baby strapped to her feeding her chickens. And then when we actually see where they're living and their home, it's like, this isn't like, you guys aren't rubbing two sticks together to start the fire. Why are you trying to paint this rural familial life when that's not your reality? So immediately you can see the visual manipulation going on. Well, there's more of her talking, giving long pauses, more of her trying to help you fill in the blanks. When she's being interviewed by herself, just such long pauses. I mean, I think they're supposed to convey emotions so deep that it's like unutterable. She cannot even give voice to these pangs of the soul. That the pain has just been so long and terrible. And that's just it's a terrible story. But the thing is that she's such a terrible storyteller. She can't even be her own propagandist. And she's just hoping that your creativity will fill in the gaps where she's just kind of lost her place in the story, So she'll just look off teary-eyed into the distance and sigh and just be like, whisper something to you to sort of like, it's just been really it's a long time to hurt. Okay. They talk about how, like, why are you making this documentary? What's the point of this documentary? And they say, well, our we had a friend, Harry says,
We had a friend who told us that there was just so much misinformation being put out there about us, books being written about us that we had nothing to do with. That a friend of ours told us we should document our lives just so that we know, so we can orient ourselves into the truth. So we started doing that. We have these video diaries that we do, and that was all at the suggestion of a friend.
I'm like, was your friend a Netflix executive? Because who in their right mind is like, I better start filming myself lest I forget what's really happening in my own life? Like, are you that unhinged from reality? Is your mental state so precarious that you better talk into your phone and film the reality of your situation lest you fall into the mire of confusion? We have lots of Meghan's old friends coming to, jumping on this chance to talk about Meghan and get their face on a Netflix documentary. This is where they really begin in earnest the story of how these two fated lovers came together and their beautiful love story, and just their eagerness, sincerity, and purity. Meghan says she just come off of a relationship and she was about to have hot girl summer. It was going to be single girl summer, and she and two friends had decided that they were just going to live, laugh, and love. And enough of this already about men. No. It was all about being single that summer. So we're giving a photo montage of all of her Instagram feed at the time. We're seeing her doing all these fun things with her girlfriends. She's on the beach at sunset. She's doing all these yoga poses in exotic locations. And we're supposed to be getting this idea that this was a girl who had great taste, a great life, that she didn't need anybody to complete her because she was already living the dream. Then we turn over to Harry. What's going on with Harry? Well, we find out that he is quite literally attracted to dogs. He's scrolling Instagram one night and he sees a friend who happens to be mutual friends with Meghan. He does not recognize Meghan. Who is this girl? Who is this fun and lively character who is so whimsical that she has shown up in his feed with a doggy filter on her face? It's the most adorable thing he's ever seen. And he says in the documentary, I looked at her and I thought to myself, oh my God, who is that? So you could have anybody in the world, and the thing that tips you over, the thing that makes you sit up and start salivating is a dog filter? What a window into his derangement. So this mutual friend conveys the message to Meghan that Harry is interested in her. So Meghan tells the interviewer, of course I didn't Google him, because why would I do that? I had no interest in what the rest of the world said about him. I wanted to know what he said about himself. So of course the first place I started was his Instagram feed. It was this beautifully curated Instagram feed of all of these beautiful nature photographs, this stunning photography. And I knew this was a person with a big heart and big feelings. And the thing that blows me away is that she is not a stranger to the way social media works for people who are well-known personalities and celebrities. I know that Prince Harry isn't a celebrity, he's royalty, but it stands to reason that what you're looking at is curated not by him, but by a team. And the same reason that she says, I didn't want to Google him because I didn't want to get everybody else's opinion of him. What you are getting is what his team wants people to see about him. I'm not saying he had no influence over his Instagram feed. And I'm not suggesting that it was his name and he'd never seen or decided what pictures were supposed to go on it. But what I'm saying is she didn't know how involved he was or wasn't. Because by the very nature of who he is, you can assume that probably that's very curated for him. I don't think the royal family has their own personal social media pages. I think that's not a thing. So I don't know why she is trying to get us to believe that she had really found a way to gauge what kind of person he was by checking out his Instagram feed. And that should be a feather in her cap for blowing past any of this Google nonsense and going straight to the source. How is that the source? How do you know that's the source? That's all I'm saying. As she's explaining how she was just so drawn in to the beauty that he was displaying on his Instagram feed, and it made her know that this was a person she wanted to get to know better because she could see his heart, spirit, and soul through all the little squares of pictures. The camera cuts over to Harry, and he literally goes, whew, like, look at that. I fooled her. So then they want to talk about their first date, right? And they just try so hard to be this like little quippy couple that just sort of is like, has this little fun banter between the two of them. And they talk about how they'd agreed to meet at a place that she doesn't name. She doesn't say it's Soho House, which I find very interesting, though she does give the actual street address. And she says, we met at whatever the address was. She says that she was there waiting for him for 30 minutes and that he was texting her and saying, I'm coming, and that she was getting really annoyed and angry because she thought that he was this egotistical guy that felt that being on time wasn't worth his effort because any girl would wait for him. So she says she's like getting really angry about it. Oddly, Harry acts like this is the first time he's ever heard this story. He's like, well, why were you getting angry? Well, what was the matter? Why is it? And she explains, because it was your ego. I thought it was going to be your ego. But then they have a laugh at his expense because apparently he blew through the door hot, sweaty, and disheveled. And it was very clear that he wasn't trying to play this suave act in which he saunters in on his good time when he feels like it, when he gets good and ready. So they laugh at him, and he kind of pinches the bridge of his nose and kind of like trying to hide his face. Like he's embarrassed. He's embarrassed at the story. He's embarrassed that she thought these things about him. He doesn't like this retelling where it kind of seems like it's always kind of at his expense. So they chat and they have a great time. She says that they were able to be silly with each other, like a couple of kids. They're so in love with themselves. I got this when I read Spare. I'm getting it now. Like they have this idea. They have sold themselves on a narrative of who they are as a couple that they banter back and forth with each other about kind of like how fun we are. Like we're so fun. Like we just unleash a side of each other that is so life-giving. I can just like kick off my shoes and be little. I'm like a little kid. Okay. I mean, I guess if she's talking about they can be whimsical and silly and the other person's not judging them. Okay. I get that, but there's just such an emphasis on how we could just be so silly together. But I need more than just like silly. I don't mind silly. Silly's fun, but I can't build a relationship on the fact that this person taps into my silly side. Is there anything beyond that? I don't know. So then she reveals that after about an hour of talking, which really isn't that long, like an hour goes by like that if you're having a really good time. After an hour, she says, okay, sorry, I gotta go, I got plans. And it's clear in the way she tells it that that was a line that she gave him because she wanted to leave him wanting more. And so she says, yeah, I told him I had plans, so I left after an hour. She didn't have plans. And I think that it's super hypocritical that she would resent what she thought was him possibly playing games at the beginning when he was late and had her sitting there for 30 minutes. She really was super angry about that. But she can cut the conversation off after an hour because she quote unquote has plans, but she doesn't. It's just a game. It's just mind games. So it's wrong if he does it, but it's okay if she does it. The reason she was angry is that she thought somebody else might have the power in this dynamic. But as soon as she realized that she had the power and that he was like putty in her hands, then she's not upset or annoyed anymore. Then she doesn't see the problem with telling people one thing when actually something else is happening. So then we get to second date, right? So she's not in England for ages and ages and ages. And he knows his time's running up. And so he wants to see her again. So they arrange once again to go to Soho House. Again, she does not name the place. She says very evasively, we went to the same place that we went to the first time. But she had already given us the street address. So I don't understand why she's not giving us the name of this place unless it's a shady business, which we kind of know it is. They decide to meet there again. And he, triumphantly, in the interview says, that time you were late. And she says, was I late? I wasn't late. What are you talking about? And he goes, no, you were late. And you can see that it ruffles her feathers that he would even say that she was late. And then she's like, well, I mean, I was a little bit late, but like a couple of minutes. I hate being late. And she makes some excuse about the fact that the reason she was late was because she'd just been at Wimbledon. And of course, they really dolled her up for Wimbledon, but she was all hot and sweaty from sitting out under the sun and had all that unrealistic makeup on that's not really her look. So she had wanted to go home, shower, and just get to be more like herself. She wanted to look more like herself. So that was her reason for being late. She'd been in the shower. They really emphasized the fact that they fell in love quickly. They realized that, oh my gosh, I'm so in love with you. I don't know how I'm going to do tomorrow without you. We're going to have to figure out a way to make this work. And oh my gosh, we're going to make this work. And like, they're both just so giddy about it. And I don't want to be this sour person that's like, stupid idiots, why are you excited about being in love? Obviously, it's an exciting thing when you find somebody that you really care about. But they're just trying so hard to sell this narrative. So then she says that, as yet one more feather in her cap, because she does a lot of like low-key bragging, that he fell in love with her really quickly against all odds because he had this long list that he was looking for in a woman. And she keeps going on about this list, and he is very uncomfortable that she would say this. He's very bothered by this revelation. It's clear that that's not something that he planned on talking about. And the interview, thinking that this would finally be one interesting little tidbit in this long and very boring interview, asks him what was on his list. And he gets testy with the interviewer, and he's like, no, I'm not going to tell you. Good try. I'm not going to tell you anything. And then he sort of wraps it up by saying, you want to know what's on the list? There, she is the list, you know, and they move right past it. But like, he's so insecure because he thinks that the media is always trying to pull one over on him, that even when they're not, it's just, Megan said he had this long list of things he was looking in a woman. Most people do have a list of things that they would like to find in a spouse. I'm not saying that it has to be, you know, super, super detailed, but most people have a general idea of what they want, and it's not unheard of. So for the interviewer to be like, what was on your list? I mean, it could be something like, I want somebody I can really talk to, somebody who makes me laugh, somebody who shares my religious convictions. I mean, these are not unheard of things to have to want in a future spouse or even a future girlfriend. So for him to get testy so fast just exposed his insecurity. He's just always acting like somebody's trying to pull one over on him and he's going to get you before you can get him. It's just a very immature and insecure stance to take. And it was unflattering to him in that moment. Anyway, they move off of that so that they can basically pivot to, well, why is Harry testy sometimes about the media? And they don't make that point explicitly, but it very seamlessly works from his tiny bit of an outburst with that interview, like, you thought you were going to get me, but you didn't. Gotcha. To discussing his mother and basically his experience with the media up until this point. So they give a little bit of history about how his mom had been hounded. Then they talk about how his mom died. Of course, we got to talk about how he had to walk behind his mom's coffin. You guys, if you haven't seen my coverage of Spare and Revenge, you might think, wow, she's really unkind about the fact that this young child had to walk behind his mom's coffin. It's just that. It's the thing that he returns to all the time when he wants a little bit of pity. You know, and he always wants to talk about how he had to walk behind his mom's coffin. Yeah, your brother did too. The brother that actually knew your mom better than you did because he'd had more time with her because he was a little bit older, you know, and he readily admits he doesn't have a lot of memories of his mom, but he definitely wants you to expend a lot of emotional energy being sad for him about walking behind her coffin. I know that was terribly tragic. I completely agree that that's terrible that happened to him, and I know that marked him for the rest of his life. However, whenever he wants your sympathy, he plays on his attachment to his mother, who his mother was, and the fact that he had to walk behind her coffin. And I'm just really, really tired of it. I just think that if his life has been one terrible tragedy after another, as he would like you to believe, then he's got to be able to cite at least one other incident beside walking behind his mom's coffin that we're supposed to rally around him to support his emotional fragility. Okay, so we get a lot of talk about, yeah, it was hard, I didn't realize when I was a kid that I was part of a special family. My grandmother didn't sit me down and happen to tell me. Everyone kind of like, nobody told me I was part of a royal family. And he's like, but then later on, I started to realize I was different. And it's like, not like later on when I was like 1.5, I picked up on the fact that things were pretty spicy for me and life was pretty terrible for everybody else. But well into school aged, he's like,
I started to notice that sometimes there were people there with cameras all around the place. And sometimes when I went skiing, we wouldn't be allowed to ski until we answered all the questions of the terrible, terrible, terrible paparazzi. And we just have to stand there in the cold and answer all the questions. And it was very hateful because it was our holiday.
and it's like no mention of the fact that the entire slope was shut down because of your family being there. So enough you're whining and complaining. And then we get, footage of his mom on a ski trip going over to the paparazzi and being like, "Would you please don't take pictures of my children? I know that you want to get a picture of them. And I know that all those other photographers got a picture of them early and you just showed up. But you're a parent and I'm a parent and you wouldn't want somebody coming after your little boy, would you? So please don't. Please go away." And actually, she asks really nice. I mean, I thought she was going to be a lot more difficult because she walks up and puts her hand over the lens, and I think she's going to be like ugly and mean, but she was actually very sweet about it. And it was like this very lovely exchange between two adults, discussing. The photographer's like, "Oh, well, come on, just one picture." And she's like, "No, please, no. I asked you nicely, and I really would like it if you would honor that." And he does. So I guess in some ways it didn't really do much to bolster his insistence that the paparazzi were these demonic creatures that could not be reasoned with, because then they show us footage of his mom reasoning very lovely with the photographer and the guy like going away. And when it comes to the photographers that were talking to them before they went out to ski, and they kind of like come up and answer some questions, that's part of being royalty. It's called noblesse oblige. Because you have this elevated place in society, it is incumbent upon you to do something with your wealth and status for those who have less than you. And if answering some questions and being a friendly individual and being part of various charities and social work and whatnot is part of being a royal family member, you can't act shocked by that. That's not an imposition upon you. I mean, granted, you didn't ask to be part of this life. You didn't ask to have this burden of noblesse oblige rest on your shoulders. But there are a lot of privileges that come with that. So if you want to focus all the live long day on the negative parts of it, sure, but at the cost of your enjoyment of life. Answer a couple of questions, then go ski on those slopes where there isn't anybody there. What's a couple of questions that you have to answer when they're like, "How's school?" "School's good." I mean, they weren't like, nobody's asking you, "How do you split an atom and create an atom bomb?" I mean, these weren't hard questions. I don't even understand how this, at the age that he is now, he could still look back on that and think that he was really imposed upon. Okay, so we go all through that, all through his retelling of his terrible life and how the royal family, and how it's always been so hard for him. We get up into his high school years and how the tabloids were all full of stories about how he's on drugs and how he had all these girlfriends and how he's wilding out and partying and blah, blah, blah. But as you'll recall from Spare, he is so angry that the paparazzi are saying these things. Meanwhile, he's doing those things. He is falling out of pubs drunk. He is doing cocaine. He is sleeping with women in the back alley behind the bar. I mean, it's ridiculous that he is so offended that these people would notice it about him, yet he makes no effort whatsoever to change his behavior. But God forbid they notice, Sons of bitches. How dare they? It's like, son, what is the matter with you? If you don't like it, change your behavior. All right, so after we get done with him laying out all his many grievances about how people noticed that he was a snake because he was being a snake, then we start talking about Africa and how the harassment led him to desperately look for a place where he could find peace. And so he started doing some aid work in Africa, also as a way to sort of connect with his mother's memory. So he did a lot of aid work in Lesotho, and they kind of adopted him there. And that's a lot of really lovely footage of him playing so charmingly with the kids and talking respectfully to the leaders of Lesotho, him in the process of doing various aid projects. There's footage of him helping at various animal preserves. And so it's really beautiful footage because you can see how at peace he is in an environment that isn't about him, and where he is being asked to help and to think about people who are in scenarios that are far, far, far more difficult than his own. You'll recall from Spare, he tells us the one meaningful story in the entire book was a story that he tells from being in Africa, where he had talked to these two boys, and he was so astounded by how much they valued the little bit of education they were able to get, and how they had this huge distance to walk to school, and that they were always under threat of being attacked and physically assaulted. But they were willing to risk it just for a little bit of education. And it really convicted him, because he'd been taking his Eton education for granted pretty significantly. And after seeing how hard these boys worked to get an education, it made him want to do better in that area of his life. The one meaningful story I had to spare. But this footage in the documentary really supports the fact that this was a place that he should have invested all his time and energy. And I guarantee you he would have been a different person today if he had. But unfortunately, he was distracted by wanting the finer things of life as well. And it's just so interesting to me that he can so clearly pinpoint, both in this documentary and in his book Spare, and other people say this about him as well, that he was most at peace when he was in Africa doing things for that continent. The tragedy is that when he met Megan, this person who spent a lot of her time trying to convince you that she was really interested in outreach for underdeveloped countries and looking for ways to uplift women, the very land in which they could have done so much of that work, and the place where Harry feels so at home and comfortable and feels that he's being a blessing to others, seems like their two objectives in life should have been married so beautifully together. And yet they haven't spent any significant time in Africa since they got together. It's crazy to me that he could understand so clearly that that is a place that meets a need in his soul. But he seems not to be bothered at all that he and Megan are not pursuing that path, even though she singularly has said that is a place where she would like to do work, and he has said that's a place where he wants to do work. Well, why aren't they doing it then? Okay, well, after we find out how much he loves Africa, we're supposed to just see it as the next most logical thing, that after having only met each other twice, he would then ask her to come to Botswana with him. Now, in the greatest lie ever told, Meg tells us this ridiculous story about how her summer was packed. I mean, hello, it's hot girl summer, right? Live, love, laugh. She had this really wonderful castmate back on her show Suits, who had told her that she needed to leave a little room for magic. And so she was planning on leaving a little room for magic. But she only had 1 week for magic. So she and Harry are talking about when they're going to see each other again, because his schedule was pretty packed with royal engagements and various things he had to do. But wouldn't you know it, he had 1 week off, and it coincided with her 1 more week for magic. She wants us to believe that that was this divine intervention, that the fates had smiled upon them, the stars were aligned, that his week off and her week off just came together. And that's when she knew that this was bigger than she was. So they've only met 2 times, and she decides that she's going to go and live with him in a tent for 5 days in Botswana. Okay, there's so much to this story that it's just like, you lie like a dog. First of all, Harry is head over heels that she's willing to come. And my question to him is, why aren't you a little bit more nervous about a girl who is wanting to run to spend 5 days in a tent with you in Botswana, and she's only met you 2 times? That doesn't raise any red flags in your royal heart. You are a prince. Who is this clingers on? Who is this leech who can't wait to go jump in a tent with you for 5 days in Botswana after having only met twice? Now, granted, they had been talking for a while. Texting, FaceTime, and the like. So it isn't as though they'd only spoken to each other 2 times. But they haven't spent time together outside of a few little meetings that they had at Soho House. So how, I ask you, are they going to jump into life in the tent for 5 days? What if they don't like each other? It didn't seem like, Megan's like, I worried about it, but I was just going to figure it out. So they tell us their story. We've got all these pictures of them jumping through the air, laughing. It's so much fake laughing in all these pictures. Megan is always laughing in these pictures. And it's always like this number. Have you ever taken a picture like that in your life? Like a candid photograph, maybe, but every single one of her pictures, it's this overacted joy. And I hate to be the cynic, y'all. I mean, my name is literally cheer, and I feel like I never bring it. But I can't cut that mask. Like the forced joy is annoying to me. Please stop. It's like she's like, do I have anything in my teeth? Anyway, he brings her to Botswana. More stories. It's very interesting. Everything that they say, it's very clear they just got done writing Spare, because it's like word for word what Spare said, which isn't really the way people tell stories. But she wants you to know that when she showed up in Botswana, she was really nervous. But then he met her and it was kind of a little bit awkward because they hadn't seen each other physically in a while. And she was like, oh no, what have I done? He, in his nervousness, handed her a chicken salad sandwich on a croissant wrapped in cellophane. And it was like, oh, okay, chicken sandwich. Thanks. That's weird. And I'm like, how is that weird? You just traveled a far distance and he thinks you might be hungry. Like she said, like in the book, it's reiterated that it was weird. Now it is. And she's always making these little jabs at him. And you can just see his discomfort because he's already an enormously insecure person. But then this person who's supposed to be like your soulmate, who like gets you can be so silly and fun. I don't feel like when they're together, I see the silly funness because they seem super uncomfortable next to each other. Like she's laughing, like she laughs the entire interview. She's laughing the whole time. It's like, you know, when you have first met somebody, like maybe you are meeting a new couple, like you and your spouse are meeting a new couple and you're like trying to get to know each other. And so everyone's like giving this sort of like false laughter. It's sort of like nervous, like, you know, you're just trying to like bring some levity to the situation, and like everybody's just like, there's like a laugh. Everything's kind of got a laugh underneath it. Like, oh my gosh, we were running so late. Were you guys almost late? Oh, you were too. You know what I'm saying? It's like everybody's just trying to. It's just this social thing we do. So Megan's acting like that the whole time in the interview. And he's over there sitting like nervously, sort of like gauging her reaction to everything and just sort of touching his face a lot. And like he does smile sometimes and, you know, but there's like a distance in his eyes. It's like he's saying things with his mouth, but his eyes are showing me something different. It's like he's trying to process things in his mind and his mind's working while his mouth is saying something else. I need to see if I can find some footage that would describe that visually for you guys. But it just, every time he talks, I feel like there's a disconnect between his mind and his mouth. All right, so Botswana's like a real hit. They like loved each other so much. Then we talk about like, what are they going to do now? Because obviously they cannot go through life without each other. The stage 5 clinger who showed up to Botswana to live in a tent with him after seeing him for 2 days is going to be the love of his life. And so even though that was kind of weird, you know, he's going to blow right past that red flag. And they decide they have to see each other for like every 2 weeks. I mean, that's a rule that Megan has set down. If we're going to be in a relationship, we have to see each other every 2 weeks. And so we get lots and lots and lots of stories about like, oh, it's so exciting and there's so much intrigue. Of course, Megan had to fly over to see him all the time because it would be way too big a deal if he left the country. Everybody would know it. So, you know, she's coming for these little clandestine moments together with them in Kensington Palace. And, you know, we get lots of footage of him like playing with the swans in the pond over at Frogmore. Like he's like goofing off by the swans, trying to get a reaction from the swan. She's like giggling in the background while she films him. It's like, is this what you guys talk about, like bringing out the kid in each other? Because this is boring. Anyway, we get lots of their like giddy retelling of this fun and exciting time in the relationship. The beginning of relationships are always giddy and fun, right? I mean, this is not an anomaly. But I guess the fact that they have to like keep trying to see each other, you know, over the Atlantic, and it's just like, when is somebody going to find out? We have to make this last as long as we can, because he says that if anybody found out, then she just would be run off, because that's what had happened with all his other girlfriends. And, you know, he's so scared that if he lets the public in on this relationship, then it's all going to be gone, and they've just got to keep things hush hush. So they are loving, they're both so theatrical and dramatic that they are loving this little secret that they have from the world. And if I'm being fair, I can see the appeal to that, you know, so I'll cut the sarcasm for a second to say, okay, that's not out of the realm of possibility that you'd find that exciting. But then it comes to light that the story is going to break that he and Megan are together. And I can't remember what how they were discovered, but they go into the night before it was discovered, and they tell all about this Halloween party they went to, and they went together, and he was in this Mad Max costume, and so nobody knew who his identity was, and they just partied hard. And we get all these pictures of them, and it was him, and it was his cousin, and it was Megan, and it was Marcus Anderson. Marcus Anderson, if you will recall from Revenge and from Spare, is this weirdo that hangs around in the background of her life constantly. And I never totally knew what his deal was. We never know why he's such big friends with Megan. But it's like Marcus Anderson and Megan, and then Harry. It's like she's going to run past everything in her life again with Marcus. It's them having a relationship. Then Harry's kind of like, that's officially her boyfriend, but Marcus is her BFF. It's a very weird relationship. This documentary didn't expound on it, but I'm just reminding you of who he is. That episode ends with this music that is all like, dun, 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 dun. What's going to happen next? What in the world are they going to do now that the world's going to know about their secret? Will it break them up, or will it bring them together? Only time will tell. And that's the end of that. These two are so boring. And it isn't because I already know the story. It's because they keep trying to insist that I should care, but it's not an interesting story. It's so normal. Two people see each other on Instagram, they have a mutual friend, then they meet, they get along, they think it's really exciting to get to know each other. She sees that she can use him, although that's not what she's saying. And he sees that there's this really pretty American actress, according to how he feels about it. Here's this really pretty American actress who's interested in him and who seems to be willing to stick around. And maybe, just maybe, since she's had a taste of celebrity herself, maybe she won't be scared away like the other girls were. And maybe this is the person who he can really be himself around. And she can totally see he's this emotional cripple. So she's just feeding him all the lines and telling him all the things and, giving him the thoughts in his head all the day long. He really seems like, because he's so emotionally bereft and unable to come up with conclusions to the scenarios that have occurred in his life, that he is desperate for somebody to tell him what 2 and 2 equals. And she comes running into the picture and she's like, 5. And he's like, well, all right, you seem to have an answer. We'll go with it. 2 + 2 is 5. And that's the end of it. Okay, I did the first episode. Let's see how I get through the second, and I will try to get more than just one episode out a week, but I have to say, this was slow going. But again, I did have a really busy weekend, so I kind of got interrupted a lot. But let me know if you enjoyed this, and if you guys want the rest of the episodes, which I am planning on doing, please let me know, and I'll crank them out for you. All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye.